Rewritten after 5 years, this week it's an expanded, updated look at the basics on Decepticon mad scientist and cold-hearted master of logic, Shockwave. The toy that would become the original Shockwave was first released by Japanese toy company Toyco under the name Astro Magnum. The figure was imported by Hasbro and released as part of the second year of the Transformers toy line in 1985. But the decision to do so was made very early, allowing Shockwave to be incorporated into the earliest pieces of Transformers media in 1984, well in advance of his toy's release. From a unique-looking robot with a large single eye instead of a face, and a gun barrel instead of a left hand, Shockwave transformed into a giant ray gun with electronic lights and sounds. This made the toy rather out of place among the other Transformers, who all turned into Earth machines and animals, but this incongruity was reconciled by Marvel Comics writer Bob Budiansky in the profile he wrote for Shockwave, which explained that he hadn't come to Earth with the other Transformers, and so retained the alien alternate mode he'd had on Cybertron. Budiansky characterized Shockwave as the Decepticon military operations commander, and essentially an evil version of Star Trek's Mr. Spock, a cold, emotionless being driven by pure logic. Logic that told him he would make a much better Decepticon leader than Megatron. Shockwave's pursuit of leadership was central to his role in the Marvel comic book. In this series, after the other Transformers crashed on prehistoric Earth and were knocked offline, Shockwave followed them to the planet, where he was met by the Dinobots, 5 Autobots who had been reactivated by their spacecraft to fight him off. In the ensuing battle, Shockwave was deactivated and buried under a landslide, where he remained for 4 million years, until a probe sent out by the Autobots after their awakening in 1984 accidentally reactivated him. Seeing how the Decepticons had been defeated by the Autobots and their human allies, Shockwave immediately seized command, securing his position by besting the weakened Megatron in combat. He went on to serve as one of the comic's main villains, appearing in both the US series and in exclusive stories written for the United Kingdom's version of the title, repeatedly clashing with Megatron over leadership, with command shifting back and forth between the two from story to story. Shockwave was handled very differently in the Transformers animated series. Now, it wasn't too unusual for characters to differ between comic and cartoon to some extent, as each spun the core personalities described in Budiansky's profiles off in different directions. But Shockwave was an unusual case, as his profile in the cartoon's production bible was almost completely different to Budiansky's. We don't know if it was an early draft that never got updated, or a deliberate change made by another writer, but it cast the emotionless bot not as Megatron's rival, but as his most loyal servant. The cartoon's Shockwave was the guardian of Cybertron, ordered by Megatron to stay behind and maintain the Decepticons' control of the planet when he and his forces left for Earth. As such, Shockwave showed up only in intermittent guest appearances in the show's first 2 seasons, notably helping to establish the space bridge that linked the 2 worlds. Voice actor Corey Burton considers Shockwave his favourite of the roles he played on the series. He based his performance on actor David Warner, in homage to Warner's role as the Master Control Program, a similarly cold and merciless computer being from the 1982 film Tron.
Hunt them down, Sentinel, and report their destination to me.
Shockwave's toy was discontinued in 1986, which led to him being phased out of both the cartoon and the comic. A death scene for him was scripted for The Transformers the Movie, in which he perished during the monster planet Unicron's attack on Cybertron, but it didn't make it into the finished film. Also, his removal from the cartoon's cast cut short plans for a storyline in the show's 3rd season, in which Shockwave's desire to protect Cybertron would have forced him to ally with the Autobots to stop the alien Quintessons from taking over the planet. Shockwave's intended role in this story instead wound up going to Blitzwing. In the comic, Shockwave apparently died in a space battle with Fortress Maximus, which ended with him tumbling through Earth's atmosphere and seemingly burning up. However, he continued to appear in the UK comic, which showed him recovering from the experience and once again clashing with Megatron and other rival Decepticons for leadership. A new toy of Shockwave, a non-transforming Action Master, hit shelves in 1990. Though he didn't adopt this form in the comic, the toy's release did lead to him returning to the US series for its final year, declaring a Decepticon civil war to take command from new leader Scorponok. After the end of the original series, Shockwave was largely absent from Transformers for over a decade, but he would return to prominence in the early 2000s, and from there, he's become one of the franchise's most notable recurring legacy characters, up there with Megatron, Starscream and Soundwave as one of the most iconic and popular Decepticons. Across all the new series in which he's featured, he has a consistency to his design that few other characters can boast, though new toy gun legislation introduced in the 1990s has forced his classic alternate mode to be left in the past, and today he instead usually turns into a tank or a spacecraft. Additionally, the huge difference between the classic cartoon and comic versions of Shockwave has inspired new series to characterize him in a variety of different ways, sometimes as a rival to Megatron, others as a loyal follower. Shockwave returned to TV screens and toy store shelves in 2004's Transformers Energon, though this version of the character, who transformed into a tank and a satellite, had to be renamed Shock Blast due to Hasbro losing the trademark on his original name. Anything but cool and logical, Shock Blast was a violent sociopath who was imprisoned by the Decepticons for attacking his comrades when he ran out of Autobots to kill. Freed to bolster Megatron's forces halfway through the series, Shock Blast chafed under Megatron's command and attempted to overthrow him by stealing the power of Unicron. But it proved too much for him, sending him on an insane rampage that ended when Megatron used Unicron to kill him. His younger brother Sixshot later tried to get revenge for him, but it ended just as poorly for him as it did for Shock Blast. Hasbro were later able to reacquire the trademark on Shockwave's name, and quickly secured it by using it for a character unrelated to the original, a Minicon stealth plane in 2005's Transformers Cybertron. With the name now back in play, Shockwave was introduced into the world of the live-action movies, appearing as a boss in the tie-in video game for the first film in 2007. Of course, this appearance was ignored when, a few years later, he made the jump to the big screen in the movie's 2011 sequel, Dark of the Moon. Ancillary media explained that Shockwave had come to Earth a century ago and had been the frozen prisoner of the Russian government until freed by the Decepticons. He was purely a remorseless killing machine who menaced the Autobots with his colossal pet Driller monster until he was taken out by Optimus Prime. But though he was dead, his likeness lived on, in man-made drones seen in 2014's Age of Extinction, and in Nitro Zeus, an admirer of Shockwave's out to get revenge for his death from 2017's The Last Knight. In 2008, Corey Burton returned to voice Shockwave in Transformers Animated. This series reinvented the character as a Decepticon undercover agent who possessed size-changing powers that allowed him to alter his appearance and pose as an Autobot crane named Longarm. In a new spin on his classic Left Behind on Cybertron story, Shockwave used this false identity to remain on Cybertron after the Decepticons were exiled at the end of the war, and infiltrate the Autobot military. As Megatron's loyal man on the inside, he climbed through the ranks until he was head of Autobot intelligence, sowing confusion and chaos from within to aid his leader in his plot to retake the planet. But throughout the 2000s, it was in comic books that some of the most significant new incarnations of Shockwave would appear. Dreamwave Productions comics combined aspects of his classic Marvel and cartoon portrayals, depicting a Shockwave whose dedication to Cybertron's well-being led him to turn against Megatron and pursue his own sinister agenda in the name of protecting the planet. While a few classic stories had depicted Shockwave as possessing some mechanical engineering skill, Dreamwave placed significant emphasis on the character's scientific abilities, his efforts to ensure a future for Cybertron leading him to experiment with Transformer genetics to advance their evolution, creating triple changers, clones, and more. Dreamwave's idea of Shockwave as a scientist who considered the future of Cybertron more important than factional loyalty carried forward into IDW Publishing's comic books. IDW gave him a new backstory as a senator who, unable to effect the change he wanted for Cybertron from within the system, began acting outside the law to achieve his goals. As punishment for his crimes, his fellow senators lobotomized him, removing his emotions, inadvertently resulting in the creation of the cold, logic-driven Shockwave, who would serve as one of IDW's primary villains for over a decade of comics. His complex and far-reaching schemes underpinned many of IDW's biggest storylines, endangering Autobot and Decepticon alike, including his creation of powerful ores with which he attempted to collapse the entire universe into a power source for Cybertron, and the manipulation of history itself, travelling back to the dawn of Cybertron and adopting the identity of Onyx Prime, one of the legendary founders of Cybertronian society, in an effort to shape the future to his liking. In 2010, Hasbro introduced the Aligned Continuity, a multimedia project designed to serve as a unified vision for Transformers lore, with Starscream filling the role of Megatron's scheming rival and Soundwave his emotionless loyalist. This universe drew on Dreamwave and IDW's comics to give Shockwave a unique new role of his own. The aligned incarnation of Shockwave was Megatron's loyal, mad scientist, tampering with Transformer genetics and engineering horrors in his lab. In the video game Fall of Cybertron, twisted experiments he carried out on Autobot prisoners led to the creation of the Dinobots. And in the Transformers Prime animated series, he resurrected the prehistoric Cybertronian reptiles, the Predacons, by cloning them from fossilized remains. He would frequently butt heads with Starscream, who was terrified that the efficient and ruthlessly logical Shockwave would steal away his position as second in command. As with a lot of the lore established by the Aligned Continuity, the concept of Shockwave as a mad scientist has since become the definitive modern take on the character, featured in most subsequent series. In 2018, in addition to making a cameo in the Bumblebee live-action movie leading the Decepticons on Cybertron in Megatron's absence, Shockwave also starred in Transformers Cyberverse, where he transformed into a spider-like walking tank. His scientific feats in this series included the creation of an army of drones cast in his own image, and the rebuilding of the damaged Decepticon Shadow Striker into a misshapen Frankenstein's monster-like form. Ultimately, he willingly gave up his life in an attempt to corrupt the life-giving Allspark with his own evil life force. 2019's Siege toy line gave Shockwave a spacecraft alternate mode that, if you looked closely, was really just his classic laser gun mode turned upside down. This toy earned him an appearance in Netflix's War for Cybertron cartoon, performing various cruel experiments, including draining the life forces of his fellow Decepticons to power their spaceship, the Nemesis. Shockwave also appeared in his Siege form in IDW's 2019 reboot of their comic books. In this universe, he once created a clone army for the mad tyrant Exarchon, and was later employed by Megatron to coordinate his military operations in the early days of the Decepticons' rise to power. Once famous for having two of the most disparate portrayals of any character in classic media, the 2010s have brought a consistency to Shockwave that seems only to have strengthened his position as a staple of the Transformers universe. Where Megatron and the Decepticons go, it's only logical that Shockwave will follow. And those are the updated basics on Shockwave. Rival for leadership, loyal follower, guardian of Cybertron, twisted scientist, which one's your favourite? Share your pick in the comments, and remember to like, subscribe, and if you can, support the show on Patreon for more history and lore from the world of the Transformers.